Shalom, and as the title is saying, the title of this video is this is an emergency. Uh, I'd like to just go fly off the handle and scream, but I don't think that's gonna look good. It's not going to be it's not going to give glory to the name of you. Essentially, this is a warning message. This is emergency level is urgent. So basically, I'm going to read a letter that I received, actually an article that I received in my email. And I just want to point out that the author of this article, so anyhow, this article is called on the third day after 3 days. Is by John Leach. Okay, to the Christian, the central point of the entire Bible is the death and resurrection of Yeshua HaMashiach, our Pesach sacrifice. Although the New Testament explains what day the resurrection was to happen, many religious leaders today seem to be puzzled by the timing of this event, of his resurrection. This writer feels people today are having trouble understanding because they are trying to fit their traditional-based Bible knowledge into a document that has as its foundation the Hebrew religion that is centered on Jerusalem and its temple as its central focus. The Bible is a book written from a Hebrew perspective, with Hebrew roots, and to understand it, the reader must view it from the reference point of Jerusalem. I will demonstrate this with a couple examples, which most people will understand. If a person was speaking to a golfer and mentioned his eagle, people unfamiliar with golf might think he had a big feathered bird, but a golfer would know exactly what the person was speaking about. Also, the hockey player excited about the hat trick he had in a previous game would completely baffle the listener not familiar with ice hockey. In this paper, I will show the statements Mashiach made about his resurrection. When viewed from a Hebrew perspective, it will clear up any misunderstanding we may have had over what day the resurrection occurred. So my understanding, personally speaking, is it was 3 days and 3 nights. He had to be in the tomb, and then he came out. So anyway, continuing on. In many places in the New Testament, the Bible states Mashiach, Christ, would rise from the dead the third day. And there's many scriptural references. I'll read them out. Matthew 16:21, Matthew 17:23, Mark 9:31, Mark 10:34, Luke 9:22, Luke 18:33, Acts 10:40. But it is also stated that this third day would come after 3 days. Matthew 27:63, Mark 8:31. So I'm just going to look up one of those references. Let's look at Luke 9:22, because Luke is a historian and he has his numbers pretty solid. So I'm going to look at Luke 9:22. I'm not going to go through all of them, just only one, just for the sake of time, so I can focus my attention on the article. So Luke 9:22, it says here, there's the 20th century New Testament. He told them that the Son of Man must undergo much suffering and be rejected by the counselors and chief priests and teachers of the Torah and be put to death and rise on the third day. Oh, actually, it does say that. Okay, didn't realize that, because I always assumed that 3 days, 3 nights, and then, the third day is just, anyway. Right. So where am I now? I lost my point. Okay, Bible students that have unknowingly been viewing their Bible through the eyes of traditional Roman religion will scoff and say, if it is after 3 days, it is impossible and too late to rise on the third day. The writers of the New Testament, viewing these statements from a Hebrew perspective, saw no contradiction in these verses. No contradiction. It is obvious that for all these scriptures to be correct, on the third day and after 3 days and 3 nights, the third day spoken of would have to be something other than a day count from the time of burial. That's common sense. The religious leaders of Jerusalem at the time of the crucifixion knew exactly what day Mashiach was speaking of when he repeatedly stated he would rise from the dead on the third day. The leaders only asked for the guard, the Roman soldiers, until the third day. Matthew 27:64. Okay, let's look at that. So they only needed the Roman contingent or the soldiers guarding the tomb until the third day. Matthew 27. Okay, why am I not connected to the internet? Okay, Matthew 27:64. Okay, it says here, so order the tomb to be made secure till the third day. Oh, okay, so it does say that. Remember that during his lifetime, that impostor said, I shall rise after 3 days, after 3 days and 3 nights. So order the tomb to be made secure till the third day. What does that mean? It's like a mystery. Okay, the writers of the New Testament, viewing these statements from a Hebrew perspective, saw no contradiction in these verses. It is obvious that for all these scriptures to be correct, on the third day and after 3 days, the third day spoken of would have to be something other than a day count from the time of burial. The religious leaders of Jerusalem at that time, okay, I read that already, until the third day, even though they had just acknowledged Christ's own statement, verse 63, that it would be after 3 days, Mashiach would disappear from his tomb after 3 days. What did these religious leaders know that most people today are ignorant of? The leaders knew if the third day finished and Mashiach was still dead, lying in the tomb, he would be proven to be a false prophet. A person will understand this mysterious third day when they understand how Elohim attaches Shavuot to the celebration of the firstborn being passed over. The Bible and the Hebrew people attach Pentecost, Shavuot, to the first high annual Sabbath, Shabbat, of the biblical year, the 15th of Aviv, the first month, because this is where they start counting from. Hebrew people count their first day on their count toward Pentecost, Shavuot, from this first high Shabbat in the Passover Pesach celebration. This can be proven by a study of many of the best commentaries and history, Josephus, Philo, etc., and the Bible itself. Roman religion, on the other hand, attaches Shavuot to Sunday. This writer finds it very strange that many people who observe the biblical Hebrew Sabbath have also unknowingly copied Roman religion's system of counting toward Pentecost. Shavuot, Roman religion has not had a good track record when it comes to numbers and counting. This shows up when it comes to calculating the biblical rest day, the fourth commandment. So as you know, the Roman religion changed Shabbat from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset to now just Sunday. So they replaced the holy day. If anyone is starting their Shavuot count on the day that follows the weekly Sabbath in unleavened bread, the Feast of Unleavened Bread, that day is Sunday, the first day of the week, the Sabbath of the Roman religion. When a calendar is checked, it is obvious that this day is also Easter Sunday most of the time, the most important Sunday of Roman religion. This writer has found it difficult to find any scriptural support for the method of starting the count toward Shavuot. Roman Catholics call the day Whit Sunday, but Protestants call the day Pentecost, with Sunday always being the first day in the count to 50. A. It can be proven which of these positions is correct by spending a short time in any city library. Mashiach, when he was on this earth 2,000 years ago, never criticized the temple for observing a holy day on the wrong day, nor did anyone accuse Yehoshua of observing holy days at a different time than the temple observed. To prove which position is correct, a person only needs to go to the local library and see what system the temple used in its count toward Shavuot, And I have to also insert here that if you want to prove which calendar Yehoshua kept, you have to see what the temple was doing. They were keeping the calendar based on the sighted moon, the sighted crescent moon. They were keeping the calendar in the new year based on the Aviv barley, and having enough as an omer to wave as a wave offering. So those are important. Okay, where am I now? When this writer checked into historians of that time period, like Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, Book 3, Chapter 10, Verse 5, and Philo, the works of Philo under Special Laws 2, the sixth festival, the beginning of the chapter, they were in perfect agreement with the Hebrew system and in disagreement with the method of always starting the count on Sunday, which works out to a Sunday Pentecost every year. The Bible states every matter must be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses, 2 Corinthians 13, verse 1. This is biblical law, Hebrews 10, 28. And we have proven already 2 witnesses, 2 in 2 Corinthians 13, 1 and Matthew 18, 16. What system was used 2,000 years ago in New Testament times at the temple? By going to the library. But what about the Old Testament? What does it have to say? Well, going back further in time, support the Sunday position. The Old Testament used today in our Bibles is from the Hebrew Masoretic text. Although some people think this text agrees with the Sunday point of view, the people that compiled the Masoretic text didn't seem to agree with the traditional Roman religion's way of starting their count on Sunday, because they started their count on the day after the high Sabbath of the first day of unleavened bread. This day could and does fall on any day of the week, just like any other holy day, if postponements are waived. If a person consults a Jewish calendar, it can be seen that the same system of counting is used today when counting toward Shavuot. Okay, let me repeat the last line. If a person consults a Jewish calendar, it can be seen that the same system of counting is used today when counting toward Shavuot. So they have a fixed date for Shavuot. They don't base it on the wave sheaf or what the weekly Sabbath is. They have a fixed date. C, we have found by going to the library that the temple and the Jews of today are in agreement, and likewise, the people that compiled the Old Testament we use in the Bibles of today also agree, but they disagree with the Sunday position. Most people today agree that the Bible of the early New Testament church was not the Masoretic text, because it wasn't put together until approximately 130 years AD, and was not brought into the Roman Church by Jerome until the 5th century AD. The Bible the early church used was the Greek Septuagint text, which is a copy of the old Hebrew text made about 250 BC. If a person has any doubts about this, all they have to do is compare where the Old Testament is quoted in the New Testament and see where the quotes come from. When the Masoretic text is compared against the Greek Septuagint, a person will find that the majority of quotes are coming right out of the Greek text. The question now must be asked, if the Bible of the early church was the Greek text, then what does the Greek text say regarding the count toward Shavuot? What does the Bible the early New Testament church used to prove all things have to say about counting to Shavuot? Leviticus 23 and verse 11, and the Greek text needs no interpretation by the reader to understand, because it clearly states which day to start the count by waving the sheaf Omer. So let's look at that. Leviticus 23. So let's look in verse 11 in the Masoretic first. What does it say? And he shall wave the sheaf before Jehovah to be accepted for you on the morrow, the day after the Sabbath. The priest shall wave it. So it says the day after Shabbat, but that could mean even the high Shabbat. So let's read in the Septuagint. It says here, "And he shall lift up the sheaf before Jehovah to be accepted for you on the day after the first day." Oh, sorry. On the morrow of the first day, the priest shall lift it up. So on the morrow of the first day. So that's the first day of using this. Looking at the context, this is the feast of unleavened bread. The first day shall be holy convocation to you. So it's the 15th of the month. So meaning the day after that holy day is the 16th. So the 16th will be the wave sheaf, according to my understanding here. Okay, so the text states, "On the morrow of the first day, the priest shall lift it up." The Greek text starts the Omer account on the morrow. Morrow means next day of this first high Sabbath day of unleavened bread. So this 16th of the first month is the first day of the count, according to the Septuagint. D. The people of the Palestine area that looked to the temple for religious guidance 2,000 years ago always knew what the present count towards Pentecost, Shavuot, was. Why were these people so conscious to what number each day was in the count towards Shavuot? The most likely reason would be because they were ordered to know and count in Leviticus 23, verses 15 to 16. What does it say in 15 to 16? "You shall number to yourselves from the day after the Shabbat, from the day on which you shall offer the wave sheaf, the sheaf of the heave offering, 7 full weeks." So the day on which you offer the wave sheaf is the 16th. So you number from that day, from the day after the high holy day, 7 full weeks until the morrow after the last week. You shall number 50 days and shall bring a new meat offering to Jehovah. But in the Septuagint, or the Masoretic rather, it says 7 Sabbaths shall be complete, whereas the Septuagint just says 7 full weeks. So I didn't understand that until now. I thought they were the same thing. They're not the same thing. But it says to number 50 days. Okay, these people not only knew when the first day was, they also knew the 10th, the 20th, the 34th, but more importantly, they also knew when the third day was. The chief priests and Pharisees knew exactly what said he would rise the third day, and foolishly thought a big stone and an armed guard could stop it. I mean, you have the situation in Jerusalem right now. The people of the religion of peace, they understand that Mashiach, Yehoshua HaMashiach, is prophesied to come into the city through a certain entry point. So what they did is they built a large graveyard, thinking that would block him from coming in the city. But anyway, so this is a similar situation. They only asked for a guard until the third day in Matthew 27:64, even though they had just acknowledged in verse 63 that Yehoshua had said this would be after 3 days and 3 nights of burial, that his tomb would suddenly become empty. There's one other place, there could be more, that stands out to this writer of people sharing knowledge of this all-important third day. Luke recorded this event in chapter 24, relaying the story of the 2 men heading for Emmaus. This chapter of Luke reveals valuable information. If we can only turn a blind eye to the way traditional Roman ideas have influenced us for a moment and view what Luke is saying through the eyes of a religious Jew who worshipped Elohim at the temple. Luke starts chapter 24 telling of the women arriving at the tomb at dawn on the first day of the week, Sunday. Their intentions were most likely, or the first day, I don't like using the pagan days names. Their intentions were most likely to apply the spices to the body as soon as there was enough light, while it was still in the cool of the day. The women were told that Mashiach had already risen from the dead sometime earlier. We find by this time, on the first day of the week, 3 days have already gone by since the late Wednesday or the fourth day of the week, burial of the previous week. This very day, verse 13, the first day of the week, the two men meet Mashiach on the road to Emmaus. The two men make a statement that has puzzled many people ever since. So let's look at that. They made a statement that has puzzled people ever since in Luke 24 and verse 13. These men said, this first day of the week also had the significance of being the third day. Yeah, that's true. 24:21. Okay, it says here, verse 21. But we were hoping that he of Israel. Yes, and besides all this, it is now 3 days since these things occurred. Three days since it happened. Okay. If a person was counting from crucifixion, which they appear to be, to someone that is not of Hebrew religion, verse 20, most people would agree that it is already into the fourth day. Okay, so if you're counting from crucifixion, it's already the fourth day. So why would these two men call this first day of the week, the 18th of Aviv, the third day? If a person asks this question of a Jew worshiping at the temple 2,000 years ago, his answer would be, because it is the third day on the Omer count towards Shavuot. The fact of this being the third day is lost by a person viewing these events through the eyes of Roman religion, because this would be the first day on their count, not the third day. Is not this third day the very day Mashiach repeatedly stated he would be raised from the dead? The Bible student by now should have Mashiach's prophetic words coming back to mind. Reader or listener, is there any other day of the year that is on the third day, yet is still after 3 days and 3 nights of burial? At this point, I would like to take the reader back to a parallel account in the book of Esther, whom I will show was a type of the Mashiach to come. A. Esther, like Mashiach, was willing to give up her life to save her people and rely entirely on the highest human power of that time, the king, to restore her life with the golden scepter, sign of his supreme power. Going into the king uninvited was suicide, Esther 4, verses 11 to 12. Mashiach, like Esther, was also willing to give up his life to save humanity and rely totally on the supreme power of the universe, the Father, to restore his consciousness. B. King Xerxes, whose law cannot be revoked, Esther 1:19 and 8:8, parallels Elohim, the Father's law, that stands even to the point where his own son had to die. Good point. C. The time of the year when Esther was willing to give up her life was the Passover season, Esther 3, verse 12. Mashiach, like Esther, was willing to give up his life at Passover time. D. The Jewish people in the time of Esther were not in any immediate danger of losing their lives. Although this plan was hatched at the beginning of the biblical year, it was not to come to fulfillment until the end of the biblical year. Esther 3:7. The biblical year is a prophetic outline of the plan of Elohim. Let me read that verse, Esther 3:7. I want to see what it actually says, because I'm not sure about that, what he's saying there. Again, this is an article that I didn't write. I was sent this in my email, and I understand this can be potentially very controversial, because my understanding is we're supposed to count from the day after the weekly Sabbath, but According to the Septuagint, it's saying, no, it's actually the day after the High Holy Day, the first day of the feast. So that's why I'm saying this is an emergency. This isn't something to be taken lightly. If you miss a holy day and you celebrate on the wrong day, or you miss it, let's just say let's say you keep both, but you miss the real one, you're going to be accountable. So that's why I'm saying this is an emergency. This isn't something to be taken lightly. Okay, it says here in verse 7 of Esther 3, he made a decree in the 12th year of the reign of Artaxerxes. So this is the 12th year, and cast lots daily and monthly to slay in one day the race of Mordecai. And the lot fell in the 14th of the month, which is Adar, which is actually the 12th month. So yeah, it was the 12th month. It's the end of the year. The people for whom Mashiach died likewise are not in any immediate danger of going into the lake of fire, because that is to happen near the end of Elohim's plan at Judgment Day. E. The plan to kill the Jews was put together on the 13th day of the first month, Esther 3:12. This meeting would have consumed pretty well all of the 13th day because of getting all the people involved together, developing the plan, translating the plan into all the different languages, deciding by lot when this plan would take place, and summoning all the couriers that would be needed to deliver the dispatch to different parts of the empire. This writer believes, because it is obvious that Mordecai would not be invited to the meeting, it would be evening, preparation day, the start of the 14th, before he would find out what was happening. The 14th day of the first month would mostly be taken up with Mordecai's weeping in sackcloth, the dialogue with Esther through her servant Hatak, and the job of notifying all the Jews in Susa, so they would be fasting together at the same time, Esther 4:16. The actual fast would not begin until the 15th and would last through the 16th and 17th of the first month, 3 complete days. The next day, the 18th, Esther would go into the king after the 3-day fast and be raised up by the king from her death sentence of going in uninvited. The 18th day of the first month is also the 3rd day in the count towards Shavuot. The very same day as Mashiach had his death revoked and was raised up by the supreme power of the universe. This day came after 3 days of being dead, in Mashiach's case, and after 3 days of no food or water. Mashiach also went without food or water for the same days, the same 3 days. So 3 days, 3 nights. In Esther's case, Esther was raised up on the 3rd day, Esther 5:1, after 3 days of fasting, and in a similar manner, Mashiach was raised up on the 3rd day after 3 days of death. The only way Esther could go into the presence of the king after 3 days of fasting and still be on the 3rd day would be if the author was using the Hebrew Shavuot count as a reference point. Let's look at that. Esther 5:1. So she actually fasted for 3 days, but she rose on the 3rd day. That's a mystery. That's a riddle right there. So what does it say in Esther 5:1? It's taking a while to load. So I'm just going to continue reading until it loads. So the only way she would go in after 3 days of fasting, is if and still be the 3rd day would be if the author was using the Hebrew Shavuot count as a reference point. Is it just coincidence that the 3 days of Esther, of Esther's fast, and the 3 days Mashiach lay dead in the tomb are the same 3 days on the Hebrew calendar? Both Esther and Mashiach's personal sacrifice freed the people from certain death at a later time. So Esther 5:1 says here, And it came to pass on the third day, when she had ceased praying, that she put off her mean dress and put on her glorious apparel. So it is a third day in both the Masoretic and the Septuagint, but she had just fasted for 3 days. So it doesn't make sense. How can it be the third day when she'd already fasted 3 days? It's actually the fourth day, unless it means something else. In summary, the ministry of Mashiach, when he was on this earth in human form, was primarily to the house of Israel. Matthew 10, verses 5 to 6, Matthew 15, verse 24. When Mashiach spoke, his audience was people with a central focus in the temple, with its many symbolic furnishings and ceremonies. These same people were schooled since childhood in the Old Testament, the only part of the Bible that was available at that time, so the Tanakh. If we, Bible students of today, are ever going to be able to understand this Hebrew authored document, we will have to realize it won't fit exactly into our Roman Catholic and Protestant influenced ways of thinking. And also, I'm going to add also the Masoretic text way of thinking or understanding. To understand the Bible, Christians of today will have to allow the mind of Mashiach, a Hebrew of the tribe of Yehuda, to dwell in us. Philippians 2, verse 5. So that's from John Leach. Yeah, so I just read this email, not even a couple hours ago, but I sat on it. I was thinking, I'm so tired. I don't have the energy to present this. But then when I calculated from the day after the first day of unleavened bread, which, according to the sighted moon, and the Aviv barley, fell on March the 11th. Actually, the 10th is the evening of the 10th is the start of the first day of unleavened bread, according to the sighted moon, according to the Aviv barley, having an Omer. And this is scriptural because this is the way Yehoshua kept it, the way all the Jews kept it in his day. So understanding that as the case, that would be the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread. So from the evening of Tuesday to the evening of Wednesday, that means the evening of the 11th, Wednesday, the 11th of March, would be the day after, would be the 16th. So from March 11th evening to March 12th sunset to sunset would be the 16th. That would be the first count. You will have 21 days at the end of the month, and then 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, 31, 32, 33, 34, 35, 36, 37, 38, 39, 40, 41, 42, 43, 44, 45, 46, 47 is today, 48, 49, 50 would be Wednesday, April 29, sunset, to Thursday, April 30, sunset. That would be Shavuot based on the Septuagint. And the way that, if you understand this article and you read it correctly, that would be a possible Shavuot. So I understand, again, that this message will potentially be unpopular. It's already unpopular to observe the calendar, the biblical calendar based on the sighted moon. Okay, like the majority of people in this planet observe the Hallel 2 calendar. I'd say the vast majority, maybe over 90% easily, of not only Jews, but Christians who observe Leviticus 23 holy days. 90% easily observe Hallel 2. So you have probably 10% or less observing the sighted moon. Probably even less. I'm going to say 5%. And then it's further more unpopular. On top of that, not only is the sighted moon unpopular, but observing it based on Jerusalem is also more unpopular. So, but I feel like most people are led to believe that it is in Jerusalem. It must be sighted in Jerusalem by 2 witnesses. On top of that, another layer. It's like sifting the wheat, as you can see. Uh, you observe the new year not only based on the new moon, and obviously the months as well, but the new year must be determined by the Viv barley. So now you're sifting it even more. That's even a smaller percentage. And not only are you observing it based on the Viv barley, but of barley, but having an omer. You need to have at least an omer to be waved on that day, the wave sheaf day, which according to the Masoretic is the day after the weekly Shabbat, or according to the Septuagint is the day after the first High Holy Day. But either way, you should have enough by Passover. Either way you cut it. So it really should be checked, in my opinion, the week leading up to Passover. So the 7 days leading up to it, just my opinion. So that's already sifting out, 5%. You're going to have probably, 3% or less of the world's population who, not world's population, but those who observe these days, and among Jews and Christians. So that's 3% of that. And then on top of that, we have this that I just talked about from this article that was written, was sent to me, that according to the Septuagint, like how many people actually not just read it, but use it as an authority, that use the Septuagint as the authoritative voice of Scripture and not the Masoretic text. You're probably looking at a tenth of the 3%. So 0.3%. You're looking at 0.3%. So I understand this message is not going to be popular at all with anybody. Only those who really respect the word of Jehovah and acknowledge that the Septuagint is the authoritative translation and version of Jehovah's word that has been preserved throughout millennia, since 300, 200 years before Yeshua's birth up to today, whereas the Masoretic came after his birth and was only fully developed 700 to 1,000 years after his birth. And there's many references where they took out references regarding his messiahship, regarding his nature, his true nature of being divine, of being Elohim. So I don't know what else to tell you. If you still rely on the Masoretic to base your thought, that's your choice. But as for me and my house, I will serve Jehovah forever, and his word is the one that has the testimony, the witness that Yeshua is the Son of Elohim, the only begotten. He is the Mashiach who is prophesied to come. He is the only one through whom we have life. He is the way, the truth, the life. He is the resurrection. Whoever believes in him, though he die, will rise again, will have eternal life. That's the one who the Masoretic text denies, who the Jews deny, for the most part, the majority of Jews deny, is the son of David, the king of Israel. But the Septuagint fully supports that he is who he claims to be, and is also God in the flesh. And it also says, now that I just learned right now, just today, on this day after the Shabbat, that Shavuot may in fact be 50 days after the first High Holy Day of the Chag HaMatzot, which is only 3 days from now. Because technically we're on day 47, 48, 49, 50. So on Wednesday at sunset, what I'm going to do, I'm going to observe this day. I'm not going to work on it. I'm not going to involve myself in any worldly things or, watching TV or Netflix or whatever, or do any worldly concerns or look at worldly matters. But I'm going to have a special meal. I'm going to refrain from work. I'm going to maybe even do a live stream if whoever wants to join, and maybe do a teaching. I'm not sure on what. I'm really not sure. We'll see what the Spirit leads me to do. I really don't know. But it should be important to set that day apart and prove it. You know, Jehovah says, prove me. So I'm going to prove that day. I'm going to keep that. But I'm also going to observe the one that I'm also led to understand is the day after the weekly Shabbat. So we'll see. I'm going to prove it and see, you know, number one, what will Jehovah show me on that day, on Wednesday, as opposed to on the Sunday? And number two, what will Jehovah do? What's he going to actually do on that day? Where we're going to see an event, because what Joseph Dumond has said is correct, that every holy day, according to the Aviv Barley and the sighted moon, there's always an event that is happening, especially on this year that he had foretold, that he had predicted, the year 2020, specifically 5856. It is the middle of the Jubilee cycle, the 120th Jubilee cycle. He's been pointing this out for 15 years, over 15 years now. And there's always something that's taking place, especially on this year. We're noticing that out of all the previous years, this is a special year. It's been set apart. There's events taking place, cataclysmic, historical, global, spanning, epic events, biblical to a biblical degree, biblical proportions that are happening on his holy days. And I have no doubt in my mind that the Passover we kept, which was March the 9th, and the first day of unleavened bread, which was March the 10th, sunset, to Wednesday, sunset, March 11, was the first day of unleavened bread. And then the seventh day of that was the 7 days later. So what would that be? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. That would be the 16th, March 16th. Monday, sunset, to Tuesday, March 17th, sunset. I have no doubt in my mind. I'm 100% convicted that was the correct date. Correct dates for Passover, first day of unleavened bread, and the last day of unleavened bread. But when it comes to this next holy day, which hasn't come yet, we still have 3 days to go. So, you know what? I was sent this email like at least a week ago, maybe more. But I now acknowledge that had put it in my heart. Well, not put in my heart. He had. I went through some hardships this week to the point that I didn't want to read the emails that I received specifically from this person, because, to be honest, a lot of the things that I'm being that I'm reading from the emails are very challenging. They are like my conscience is being challenged, because I know that the words of Jehovah, when everything you believe could be wrong, there is a human tendency to put up a wall of resistance. So confirmation bias means the tendency to interpret new evidence as confirmation of one's existing beliefs or theories. So it challenges everything that I once believed. You know, when I first came into this walk in the year 2000, 2001, everything I believed about God and about the Bible was challenged, because God was telling me, Elohim, Jehovah was telling me, you are wrong about everything you know about me, or you think you know about me and what's in my scriptures. You are wrong. You have not been keeping my 10 commandments. You have not been keeping the Shabbat. You have not been keeping my holy days. You've been keeping the holy days of foreign Elohim, of Elohim that you don't even know about. Humble myself and say, you know, I'm just a man, and whatever God wants, whatever Elohim expects of me, I should be doing. So that was the year 2001. And, it wasn't easy because there's resistance from family, from friends, from society, from workplace, from all the people who are not keeping these ways. The flesh wars against the spirit. To humanity, these things are foolish. But when you have the spirit of Elohim working with you and is inside of you, you will be led to be able to obey it, and your conscience will convict you. Kept, and that was probably harder than the first one in year 2001, because at least I knew I wasn't reading the Bible at that time. But it's been 15 years or more than that. Um, but it was at least 15 years that I was reading the Bible, studying it very, I would say diligently. And it was no longer just a book like literature. It was an instruction book, an instruction manual for life, how to live. And I thought, I knew it all. I know the Bible inside and out. But then there are people such as James Malm of the Shining Light blog, people like uh, Henderson, the Henderson family, and formerly of United Church of God in Kagwa, and Joseph Duman, who's probably the prime, uh, the head, I guess you could say, of the sighted moon kind of movement. That challenged my confirmation bias like nothing else, because I knew, being a single man, that I have to come to grips that with the potential reality that I would be single all my life, because it was hard enough to find a wife or a mate in the Church of God, and they already were sifted out in 1995 when they had over 150,000 members, and then they dwindled down to, so many churches, less than, I'd say probably a third or somewhere abouts there. So, and then if you go believing that the month is based on the sighted moon and also the year based on the Viv barley, you're going to sift that down to fewer and fewer members, a smaller and smaller flock. So the likelihood, based on my human understanding, of finding a wife is very, very slim. But that is not a man of faith who looks out the outward circumstances. A man of faith, of emunah, faithfulness, understands that Jehovah will give you what you need at the right time. And Jehovah also operates, and he prefers to operate in situations where things seem unlikely and impossible. Look at King David, or before he was King David, he was just a boy, probably not in puberty yet, or not an adult, obviously, not 20 years old yet. And he had the bravery to stand up to Goliath, even though it made no sense to do that to, King Saul and a lot of the people. But he did so because he had the faith that Jehovah would deliver Goliath into his hands, just like he did previously with the lion and the bear. So that's the way we must operate as well. So yeah, I knew that would be one of the toughest decisions in my life, but it would be a good decision because it's always good to obey Elohim rather than man. And I understood at the time, and I still do, that the Hillel calendar was created by man, but with a purpose to provide a temporary solution for those in the captivity. But since that is over, you no longer need that calendar. So they're still working with a temporary solution. Although the solution has been found, they're already in Israel. They already have Jerusalem, and they can sight the moon from there. So that solution is there. There's no need for the temporary solution. That's only there as a guideline. And then with the Viv barley, there's further sifting. And now with this Shavuot, that's more sifting. And I know this is going to be unpopular because it was never popular to begin with to go into this way of life, to accept the holy days and to reject the pagan holidays, holy days. It was never popular to accept the calendar based on the sighted moon. It was never popular to accept the calendar and the new year based on Aviv barley, and it still isn't. People are so antagonistic against those people observing it based on the barley, and not just the barley, but an omer of barley. That's, you can see so many, the reaction of people when you tell them that they're not friendly towards you. They're like they're enemies, maybe worse than enemies. And fourthly, with Shavuot now, saying that this could be, in fact, on the 50 days after the first day of the Feast of Unleavened Bread, the first day of the feast, the High Holy Day, not the weekly Shabbat, but as was expressed, as was detailed in the article I just read by John, that it's actually in 3 days, Wednesday at sunset to Thursday at sunset. So, I know that a lot of people are going to close their hearts to this message because confirmation bias, again, it's not easy. It is not easy. I read about Enoch and his calendar. And again, I'm proving that to myself right now. Which calendar is the true one? Is it the Enochian calendar or is it the sighted moon calendar? Personally, I don't see a conflict. I don't think they conflict each other. The sighted moon calendar is a lunar calendar. The Enochian calendar is not a lunar calendar, it's a solar calendar. It's solar and lunar. It describes a lunar year and it describes a solar year. So what do you do with those two pieces of that? Again, I know this is going to be unpopular, and I know I am going to be unpopular. I don't want to be famous. I don't want to be infamous, but whatever Yehovah wants me to do and say, that I will do. I'm not a prophet in the classical understanding that a prophet does miracles, because I know that from me I can do nothing, but through Yehovah I can do anything. Anyone. Yehovah can open the mouth of a donkey. He can work with a dog. He can work with somebody who isn't from the stock of Israel. I know I'm not from the bloodline of Israel. My understanding is that I am from the son of Noah, who is Japheth, and the son of Japheth, who is Yoktan, and I believe the son of Yoktan or Javan. I can't remember right now. Tarshish, anyway. That's the one I'm looking for. But that's my understanding anyway. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. This is a difficult video to record because in my last video, doing the Sighted Moon newsletter, I talk about the topic I spoke about because I knew it would make me unpopular, and I felt that my time has not yet come. Whatever Yehovah wants, His purposed me to do for being born. I know my purpose, the greater purpose, is to obey Him, to fear Him all my life, and to stay faithful to the covenant I made with Him. And the greater purpose of humanity is to become sons and daughters of Him, to live forever in His kingdom. But in terms of my lifetime on this planet Earth, as to what that ultimate purpose is at the end of my life, what I will say or do, only Yehovah knows. But so far, it's like He flicked an on switch since this pandemic started in February, when I started to do videos of a spiritual nature, and there's no looking back now. There's no going back to that old life. There's no way. Even if I do, I feel like He's going to take me back out. But why would I go back? Why would I return to my vomit? Why would I return to sewage raw sewage. Why would I go down to that again? To me, all those things and that old way of life it's worthless. It's vanity. It's foolishness. I'm not saying there's nothing in this world that has redeemable qualities. There are some things that are good, some things that are beautiful, some things that have virtue, some things that are honorable. But the majority of them are foolishness and are stumbling blocks and are snares, they're traps, they are full of sin, they are anti-Torah. So again, I know this is unpopular, what I've presented today, what I've read. This article will be unpopular. I was warned in advance from the author that I would become unpopular. But Jehovah isn't concerned with popularity. He isn't concerned, and neither should I be, that people will be against me, because they're not really against me, they're against Jehovah. I'm only telling you what is written in his word in the Septuagint. If I'm going to be unpopular for that sake, then so be it. If I'm going to be unpopular for saying Yahushua is Mashiach and he is the son of Elohim, he was the word at the beginning, he's the elect one, he's the one mentioned in all the books that we've rejected, such as Enoch, so be it. But that book was only removed and censored because it attests to the fact that Yahushua will be the son of Elohim, he will be the elect one coming to judge the whole earth and to put down kings and to take over the governments of this world and make them his own. That's what it says in Enoch. No wonder they wanted to remove it. And no wonder they wanted to also remove the book of Revelation as well, because it said very similar things to Enoch. Just people don't know it because they don't read it. That's a shame. Why are we wasting our time on such vain things like TV, movies, and worldly things, and we don't look at the word of Elohim and the book of Enoch, which is mentioned in the book of Jude? That should be number one priority. Use our Elohim above all. That's the first commandment. But we should prioritize. So that's all I have to say about that. I didn't want to make this video too long because I wanted this to be able to be digested and to be viewed. So it's almost an hour. Sorry, it's getting to an hour. So you know what? I just pray that the shalom of Elohim be with you, of Jehovah. May he send his holy angels to protect you and to make your way prosperous, because the days are approaching. And I also encourage those whose heart is leading them and the spirit of Jehovah, the Ruach HaKodesh, is leading you to please, observe this day of Shavuot based on the Septuagint on the Wednesday sunset to Thursday sunset, if you feel convicted to do so, and I'm going to be doing so. And also, do the one that you understand as well. Keep both and prove which one is correct. Look for signs. Pray Jehovah shows you a sign, what he will do on those days. Okay, shalom.